There's a kind of exhaustion that feels strangely familiar, one that most adults have experienced at some point. It's standing in a room full of people, holding a drink, smiling at the right moments, nodding in the right places, but inside, having no idea what to say next. At first, everything seems fine. How have you been lately? Which department are you in? Got any plans for the weekend? And then suddenly the conversation stalls. Nothing bad has happened. No one said anything wrong. No one was rude. It's just that the atmosphere dips slightly, and both people fall into a very modern reflex, glancing down at their phones as if there's an escape waiting there. Many people think that moment says something about them, that they're boring, that they lack charm, that others are naturally good at connecting, while they're not. But the older I get, the more I realize, most people who seem naturally good at conversation aren't more confident than others. They just do a few very small things well. So small that if you're not paying attention, you'd think it's instinct. In reality, communication doesn't begin with being interesting. It begins with paying attention. And sometimes, just understanding that alone can ease a lot of self-doubt. Because if it's a skill, it can be learned. You don't need to become louder. You don't need to force yourself to be the most extroverted person in the room. You just need to change how you enter a conversation. The first thing sounds simple, but it's where many conversations quietly die. It's how we respond. There's a big difference between replying just to move on and opening another door. Someone says, "I went golfing last weekend." The most common response is, "Oh, that's nice. It's not wrong," but it closes everything. That sentence is like placing a small period at the end of their story, and then both of you stand there, looking at the space that follows. But shift it just a little, and the atmosphere changes. Who got you into that? Do you actually enjoy golf, or is it just an excuse to get out for a few hours? What do you like more, the game or being outdoors? They still sound normal, but underneath those questions is a very human message. I'm still here. I haven't moved past you. And people can feel that. The truth is, most people don't need someone incredibly interesting in front of them. They just need to feel like their story isn't being cut off halfway. There's something a bit sad about modern life. Everyone is busy trying to appear okay, to the point that very few people truly help others say a little more about themselves. So sometimes, the right question doesn't just keep a conversation alive. It softens the other person. But here's the more important part. No matter how good your questions are, it doesn't matter if your mind has already wandered while the other person is answering. Many people hear, but aren't truly present. The other person is speaking, while inside your head, there's a rushed internal meeting. What should I say to sound smart? How does this relate to me? Don't make this awkward. Say something next. So you hear the words, but miss the truest part behind them. Someone says, "I just moved to Chicago." If you rush, it's just data, a city, a fact. That's it. But if you slow down a little, you'll notice there could be much more inside that sentence. Excitement, loneliness, the feeling of starting over at an age when you thought you were already settled. And from there, your next question won't be a reflex. It will have depth. Was it hard to adjust? What surprised you most about it? Does it feel like home yet, or still a bit unfamiliar? Many people think that to be engaging, They need to say sharp, clever things. But if you look closely, the conversations we remember most aren't the ones where the other person spoke brilliantly. They're the ones where, around that person, we didn't have to perform. We didn't have to try to seem interesting. We didn't have to jump in at the perfect moment. We didn't have to hold ourselves together just to be likable. That feeling alone is already a form of comfort. And when people feel safe, they stop giving polished answers. They start giving real ones. At that point, something beautiful begins to happen, even in ordinary conversations. Two people find a small piece of life they both recognize. It doesn't have to be big. Connection doesn't always come from having the same background, job, or personality. Sometimes it comes from something very small that both people instantly understand. Both disliking Sunday evenings. Both calling their mom on the drive home. Both sitting in the car for a few extra minutes before going inside, just to have a brief moment of quiet. I once heard someone say exactly that at a crowded dinner. He smiled and said that some days after work, he parks in front of his house and just sits there for 5 minutes. Doing nothing. Just sitting. The whole table went quiet for a moment. Not an awkward silence, but the kind where everyone suddenly realizes, I'm not the only one who does that. Then someone else laughed and said, I do that too. That's the moment the conversation changes. It's no longer an exchange of information. It becomes recognition. And usually people don't feel close because of the most impressive things about each other. They feel close because of a shared fatigue, a small habit, a quiet vulnerability that both understand but rarely say out loud. That's why some people aren't particularly talkative or charming, but still make you want to keep talking, because around them you feel seen. But perhaps the hardest part is this: silence. Most of us don't fear saying the wrong thing as much as we fear the pause. That moment when no one speaks for a few seconds, just enough for your chest to tighten and your mind to panic. Say something, anything. And that fear ruins everything. We rush, we fill the space. We say things that don't belong to us just to cover the gap. When the truth is, not every silence is a failure. Some silences are just a breath. Some are moments where the other person is thinking. Some mean that what was just said actually mattered. And some silences are simply two people being together without needing to perform constantly. The older I get, the more I see that one sign of emotional steadiness isn't speaking better. It's panicking less in those very human pauses. When we stop seeing silence as proof that we're inadequate, we begin to relax. And strangely, it's in that relaxed state that conversation becomes more natural. Not with everyone, and that's okay. Not everyone will click. Not every conversation will go deep. Not every version of you will show up at its best. But these three things almost always help. Ask as if you truly want to understand. Listen as if the other person doesn't need to defend themselves. And be patient enough to find even a small piece of shared truth between you. It's not a trick. It's not a social hack. It's simply a way to make a moment between two people a little more real. And sometimes, in a world where everyone is rushing, a little more real is already a lot. If you've always thought you weren't good at communication, maybe don't rush to ask, how can I be more interesting? Ask something gentler instead. How can I make the person in front of me feel a little less alone while talking to me? Because in the end, people rarely remember exactly what you said, but they remember how they felt around you. And usually, what makes someone memorable isn't how brightly they shine, but how much they allow others to be themselves. The secret to natural conversation isn't becoming more impressive. It's becoming more genuinely interested.